because everyone's hoping for a brand new start. We've got the analysts in and would love to hear your thoughts and comments. WhatsApp number is 0809 440 You can also tweet at smooth981. And don't forget, we're streaming live on YouTube as well. You can catch that live stream and even post a comment on there. It's smooth981.
We say big good morning to Mr. C and Chibuzor as we get started this morning. Mr. C, let's go over to our first headline, and that will take us to the Punch newspaper. And comes the headline: Senate approves President Tinubu's request to borrow $7.8 billion and also in euros, that amounts to about 100 million euros. So what does this portend for debt profile, and is it good or bad to even borrow in the first place?
Okay, thank you. So good morning, Lagos, and a happy new year to everyone in Lagos and everyone who's listening to us outside Lagos. And good morning, Chibuzor. So let's take the story. The Senate has finally approved the $7.8 billion loan request, and a 100 million euro loan request. Now, we must remember that on the 15th of May, 2023, the Federal Executive Council under the former president, Mr. Muhammadu Buhari, had approved the request that Nigeria borrow the said sum, which was intended to strengthen the economy across a number of sectors. Now, we have received a report that the Senate has duly considered and adopted the report and has granted the approval. Now, what is this loan supposed to do? Well, according to the current president, it's supposed to bridge the financial gap and return the economic activities of the country to normalcy, adding that it will be developing infrastructure, agriculture, health, education, water supply, security and employment, as well as financial management reforms. Now, to answer Omatseye's question, debts in themselves are not bad, because the truth of the matter is you cannot always use your own resources solely to develop your agenda. So we see that even private individuals, private businesses take on loans to boost the growth of their businesses. Now, traditionally, what has happened in Nigeria is Nigeria has taken up a lot of loans, and years or decades after the loans have been taken, we're struggling to see what the loans were applied to, and we're left with a staggering debt profile. Now, what does this mean for Nigeria's current debt profile? It only means that Nigeria's debt profile will increase by some substantial sum, because whether we like it or not, $7.8 billion is not a small sum, no matter how wealthy you think you are. Allied with the 100 million euro loan. Now, we've always been concerned, or some of us have been concerned about the ability of the federal government to deal with interest payments on existing debt vis-a-vis capital projects that need to be executed to further drive the country forward, and then juxtapose all of that with the need to continue to pay salaries, to continue to pay pensions, to continue to pay gratuities. So this is a very interesting period, and we're not sure where the money to actually repay the sum is coming from, because ostensibly we'll be told that it will come from Nigeria's oil receipts. Now, Nigeria's oil production has declined to an all-time low in the recent years, and currently we're doing about 1.2 million barrels. Now, what is interesting is the authorities do not indicate whether that includes condensates or not. If that figure includes condensates, then the real production value is much lower. Now, why have we had reduced oil production? There's insecurity and the likes, and if there's insecurity, there's oil theft. And unless we stop the rot in that sector, and we also diversify our country's revenue streams, we're going to be saddled with more debts than we really need. Now, tack onto that the fact that some regular Nigerian citizens truly cannot see where this money will be going to. Yes, we've heard the flowery language, we've heard what will pass for detail, but case in point is the removal, the official position that the fuel subsidy has been removed. And this was announced on the 29th of May, 2023. So we've done about 7 months supposedly with no fuel subsidy. Now, the question that is on the lips of Nigerians from Damaturu to Afikpo to Umuahia to Lafia is the savings for the past 7 months. What is the total sum? Where is that money? What has it been applied to? Has it been used to improve the lot of Nigerians? And you will get the response from strident government supporters that the palliatives that have been announced were not funded by oxygen or kerosene. They were funded by Naira. Now, the minister, Mrs. Betedu, has come out to say that 15 million Nigerians have collected 25,000 Naira. Well, she must have whatever data she's relying on to make that statement. But the truth is, ordinary Nigerians like you and I do not know anyone who has collected that sum. So it's a very interesting mix. And when we take the second story, we then find out there's even another sum that has been borrowed and would also need to be repaid. So the bigger question here is accountability, transparency. Where are we with that? What are these sums? These sums, are they not being tied to specific line items? What are they? How does the average Nigerian track government expenditure? So these are all questions we will see whether we get answers to in 2024.
All right. As you sum up this piece of a story for us, there is also in the story the approval by the Senate of the Ways and Means amounting to 7.3 trillion naira. Would like you to also speak to that.
Okay, so with this ways, so traditionally, what are ways and means? Ways and means traditionally or legally are advances from the central bank to the Nigerian government, because the central bank is the banker to the Nigerian government. Now, they're supposed to be short-term loans to bridge funding gaps from the expected receipt of Nigerian income. Now, over the years, we have seen the abuse of the ways and means system, and just before the previous administration left, they had to do over, I think, 20 trillion in ways and means. We've now discovered that this present administration has already borrowed 7.3 trillion and wants to have it securitized as debt instruments. What does that mean? It means that the interest rate the government will have to pay will be reduced. However, they are required to pay interest on these new securities to the people who will buy them. Now, again, big question, 7.3 trillion already borrowed in 7 months. Where did that money go to? And why did we have to borrow so much if we already seemingly had savings from the fuel subsidy removal? So there are lots of questions, there are seeming contradictions, and let's pray we'll get the much needed clarity in 2024.
All right, thank you for that, Mr. C. Let's go on to Daily Trust. Disco set to hike electricity tariffs January 1st. And the body basically says there's strong indications that the discos are going to hike tariffs from today. An official source from one of the discos confirmed this under the condition of anonymity.
So, good morning, Lagos. It's another 366 days, 2024. So, we are in for a long ride, but hopefully interesting one. So, this story comes out, and there's been conflicting stories after the story coming out from. And after that, the National Electoral Regulatory Company were refuting the proposed changes, the details about the change. But yeah, the crux of the story is basically that distribution companies had some emergency meeting. I think it was the last night, in the middle of the night somewhere, they agreed that they want to increase tariffs. Electricity tariffs. So, like I said, there's no smoke without fire. So in reality, the electricity companies distribution companies do have a remit to review their tariffs every 6 months. And obviously you review tariffs to see if they are still compliant with your cost, you are still compliant with your cost of providing that service. And that happens in every utility organization, any company that provides a service. Let's not forget that most of the inputs for electricity distribution is still dollar-based. You still have to buy the gas, you still have to pay for a lot of inputs into the process. And one of the major challenges about both and development within the industries about their inability to charge cost-reflective tariffs. Now, there's been a lot of pushback from government and in several instances where they have tried to review their tariffs, and it's obvious why government has pushed back. In the last year, government removed the subsidies on fuel power, which is one major cost for most Nigerians. And once you remove the cost subsidy of fuel, the other form of power that most Nigerians consume, most Nigerians, when they can get it, is electrical power, which is other being input into their cost. Then, if you take into consideration also the foreign exchanges and other things that happen with the economy, increased inflation rates, obviously the government did not feel it was a great time for them to be able to go ahead with increasing their tariffs, which would have put additional burden on Nigerians. I don't think the government has changed their positions yet, going by the president's speech this morning. So yes, there's some conflict. The NERC has come out and said that they are not aware of any plans to increase tariffs by distribution companies. The story, well, this was given on the basis of anonymity. So we are all waiting. We're just going to cross our fingers, twiddle our toes, and try and see how this pans out while we still try and enjoy the new year that we've come into. So, hey, the reality is at some point we need to take some decision about how we want to improve power distribution and availability in the country. Does increasing tariffs come with it? Most likely, yes, because it now gives the distribution companies and their investors some incentive to put money into this system, and that's how we will do. Because obviously we do not see the federal government funding the growth and expansion that is required. So we will need to see it and see, but the only thing is that Nigerians need to be able to there needs to be some clarity. Nigerians need to be able to plan for this. Nigerians need to be able to have alternatives to this. And in doing this, the federal government also needs to know that power is not just for the drive or need for power for the Nigerian citizens is just not to switch on their TV sets and have a nice time, which is good, but also to drive development, drive commercial activities, drive generation of revenue, which drives taxes, which drives improvement, which drive the actual growth and development that the country needs, and which, because that will be driven by economic activity and not just by handouts.
Now, Chibuzor, before we let that story go by, I'd just like you to speak to this aspect of it, which is, does the federal government still subsidize electricity for Nigerians?
What I know is that today the distribution companies are not charging cost-reflective tariffs. So somebody else must be paying the deficit. Obviously, the distribution companies are getting their full value. They wouldn't need to even think about pushing for increases. So there's something missing in that process. They're either performing at a loss or the government is picking up the slack at some point.
Mr. C, did you want to add something?
Yes, so very quickly, I agree with what Chibuzor has said, but I wanted to add something. The denial by the NERC, which is an industry regulator, is neither here nor there. And the reason why I say this is, in the third quarter of 2023, there was a price increase. Officially, it was never announced, but subscribers who went to buy power noticed the difference. Of course, there were complaints and there were questions, but those questions were never answered. And I think this has become the new practice of that industry, that just silently introduce the tariff, because if you were to make it public, everywhere will be unstable and it will be chaotic. So the truth of the matter is, it is when people go to buy power this week that we will know of a certainty whether there's been a tariff increase. Because the same amount that you would, so what 10,000 Naira would have gotten you last year in terms of electricity units should still get you the same quantity. If it doesn't, and the quantity is reduced, then the tariff has gone up. That's the best way to check. And if it has, then of course it's to call out the regulator and provide material proof to them. Then we will see how they take it up from that point.
So one of the things I just quickly said before we close this is that it also, what Mr. C said was actually quite accurate. And it speaks also to the role of consumer protection agencies within Nigeria. I think in moving to some level of privatization, we still most of these agencies still think about some of these entities as being government driven and government owned, which is for me also one of the reasons why the government should have their hands completely off it and play the role of regulation or support the regulations instead of participating in these industries. Because in other clients, what you expect is that there will be some actions by the consumer protection agencies to protect the consumer. But in this instance, unless it's private entities like maybe telcos or whatever, they are very silent about this kind of actions, which is very interesting because also on the side of the telcos have been prevented from increasing their tariffs for since last year, and they've been reaching out to do that. So it's like Mr. C says, well, when I buy my tariffs maybe tomorrow or next tomorrow, I'll see how much I'm getting for the value I'm paying.
All right, Chibuzor, would I wait for you to let us know what it's looking like then? Let's quickly go over to Mr. C. Mr. C, it's time again. This would also be linking to our earlier story. Now, when we get to this one, there will be licenses at this time. That's what the federal government plans oil licensing round to attract new investors in 2024. That's according to the Vanguard newspaper. So you might want to say, getting this license, it's not chicken feed. So definitely we expect people to pick this up. But where my concern is, it's a part of the story where the chief executive of the upstream regulator had said the cost of production in Nigeria is very expensive. How would this affect people taking up the licenses then?
Okay, thank you, Omas. I'm trying to be a bit more upbeat and positive about Nigeria in 2024. Well, when I read stories like this, it's quite distressing. So why do I say that? We're all witnesses to the fact that international oil companies have been scrambling for the exit door for the past 24 months at the very least. And they're scrambling to leave. They're determined to get rid of some of their assets in Nigeria. Now we have a government telling us that it's planning to attract new investors in 2024. Now, who are the new investors we're targeting? Certainly, you are not targeting foreign investors because we have to give them more credit than we were wont to do. They see what is going on, they see what has happened, and they're not ready to get into that volatile mix. So basically, what the implied understanding from this story is we're looking at private Nigerian companies to do the business. Now, why is the cost of oil production higher in Nigeria than it is, say, in Saudi Arabia, Kuwait, or Oman, or even Qatar? Only the government and the players can answer that question. Remember, we're still flaring gas at unbelievable levels. Yes, in fact, there is a fine in place at the moment, but it makes more sense to contravene and pay the fine. Now, they're looking to increase production from 1.8 million barrels to 2.6 million barrels per day. Now, the first challenge I have with that arrangement is we're not even doing 1.8 million barrels now. We're doing about 1.2. And like I said in the earlier story, that is contingent on whether or not condensates are included in that figure. Now, you want to grow your targets, your daily production by about 800,000 barrels in 1 year. What is the sort of magic you are intending to deploy? Because there are a number of factors that have ensured we've stayed at 1.2, which is even the official figure. We have the oil theft, we have the rising insecurity, and the shocking but quite true position that we do not even know how many barrels of crude oil we produce on a daily basis. It is truly shocking, but that is the reality on the ground. I've spoken to a number of players in that industry, and they say, you'll be shocked. Now, how the government intends to get about that remains to be seen. Now, in theory, what they're trying to do actually makes a lot of sense because you need to get fresh investment in. But again, with this subsidy arrangement, it's still not clear whether the subsidy is there or not. I would make bold to say today that the subsidy is still there in some form. And the easiest way to check, we're not refining crude oil in Nigeria, so we have to bring it in. Check what the landing cost is. Check what the price is at the station. The landing cost usually tends to be higher and has been higher for at least the last 5 to 10 years. So that differential between the landing cost and the price at your fuel dispensing station, who is bearing that, who is carrying that figure? certainly not spirit. It's somebody bearing that figure. So for as long as that figure, that amount is not passed on to the end consumer, which is me and you, then there is still a subsidy in place somewhere. Now, we've also been told that the Port Harcourt refinery will start in 2024. We had been regaled with stories where we had been assured it'll be ready by December 2023. December 2023 has come and gone. Of course, it hasn't started. The refinery in Lekki, Lekki, we've been told, oh, it would come on stream in 2023. Of course, it did not come on stream in 2023. We're now in 2024. And it is critically important that our public officials start to give us some credit and start to tell us the complete truth, give us the full details. Stop telling us what you think you want us to hear. Give us the real details, because I dare say Q1 2024 will pass. The Port Harcourt refinery may not come on stream because there's still some work, which is quite substantial, to be done. As for the other refinery I mentioned, if they commence operations this year, it will truly be a miracle.
Even with 3 million barrels of crude oil received so far, are you still not optimistic that it's for play, or what are they doing with it then?
They're the only ones who can answer that question, because they're the key units required to refine the crude oil is not ready. And if you know people,
all right, let's go on to some of the messages. Okay.
No, that's fine. That's fine. I'm done.
All right. Emeka says, opening the year by borrowing is a bad omen. Ajayi says, thank you, Ajayi, for your message, for your season's greetings. He says, approving additional loans for the country when loan profile is already hit 83 trillion is not a welcome development. Government should rather cut wastage in governance. Dan Okuda says, compliments of the season. We've not really felt the impact of the borrowing. Borrowing in itself is not bad, but what is bad is using the borrowed funds for frivolities and consumption. Joseph Menyi says, why is NERC plain ignorant and lie that it is a rumor? Most times you hear such news. They have already implemented the increments. They're just trying to feel the pulse of the citizens. Is this how things should be run? It's fraudulent. And Cisco Delgado say, let's see, Cisco Delgado. Okay, I'm gonna come back to your message. There are a few on there. But yeah, let's move on to Vanguard. This one comes from the Vanguard, and it says domesticate NHIA now to end the sufferings of Nigerians. And this according to the state chairman of the NMA, Dr. Benjamin Olowo-Jebutu.
So I wish it was that simple. So the NHIE is the National Health Insurance Act, which was signed in May 2022 by the former president, Muhammad Buhari, and replaced the NHIS, which was the National Health Insurance Scheme. What it did was it made health insurance mandatory in Nigeria, recognizing the centralized state of health insurance in Nigeria, provided for vulnerable good funds, and also empower the NHIA to promote, regulate, and integrate health insurance schemes in the country. So I think the first part is what is very interesting for most of us and what is happening for us, which is that we made health insurance schemes or health insurance mandatory for residents of Nigeria. And that's where the drama starts, because if you look at, from my little perch in somewhere in Lagos, I do know that the many people that I know, that most people that I know have, or most residents of Lagos that I know that do have a health insurance schemes, either employed by reasonably sized organizations who are able to give them, give them that benefit. And some other organizations have taken, large people are employed by organizations. Obviously, there's another small chunk of people who have taken up insurance schemes for themselves and pay on a monthly basis or whatever plan that has been given by those insurance schemes. But I do not feel that this scheme between this scheme has been, as they said, has been domesticated enough for people to even be aware of it and people to take advantage of it. So this was obviously started in 2022, and this is 2024, start of 2024. And what the enemy, head of the enemy is speaking is basically saying that if we can get this scheme and it is designed to work the way it ought to work, it means that every Nigerian resident, anybody who would have health insurance and be able to walk into some health facility at whatever level to be able to get at least basic health access to health services. And that's the ideal, and that's what we expect. What we have today, obviously, is not what is ideal and not what we expect, and it's a mixture of a lot of things. Obviously, I recall last year the governor of Lagos State had asked some of the agencies within Lagos to actually drive the domestication within the state, because I think Lagos State also has the LSHS, which is the Lagos State Health Scheme, which they wanted to align with the NHIE, to drive, because it was basically driving the same ideas. And what needs to happen is that people need, because the entire idea of insurance schemes is that you're pulling in funds to be able to cover the cost of one individual at a time without individual having to bear the total cost. So what we do expect, or what should happen, is that people should have access to those schemes at reasonable prices, at prices and plans where they can pay at some convenience, because we do know that the nature of our economy means that a lot of people are daily income earners, so do not have money set aside for long-term investments or long-term pooling. But we need to drive the awareness for people to know that the services exist and they exist at reasonable prices. They need to be aware that hospitals exist that will be able to reach out to this, because the existence of this at the scale at which it is also would empower the sector in itself and fund the sector in itself. So we're able to retain doctors, we're able to keep some doctors, we're able to drive the growth and expansion of facilities. And in ideal, but obviously one thing that we need to look at this stage of is the impact of inflation and cost of it, and the ability to price those plans at the right price where the average Nigerian can have access to, which is the other problem, because the last year obviously everything has gone up. And with everything, all the prices going up, obviously the cost of maintaining the health insurance scheme also has gone up. How does the average Nigerian pay or afford those services now in 2024? Is another thing that the government needs to look at as they try to domesticate this out.
All right, Mr. C, our final paper would be at your table. Let's pick this one up, and it's coming from the Daily Post newspaper. The Senate passes 2024 appropriation bill, increases budget by 1.2 trillion naira. Did that come to you as a surprise, or could that be for contingency reason? Maybe, you're going for shopping, or madam is going to the market. You say, okay, I have an extra just in case the prices don't stay the same way. But speak to this to us with its medium-term expenditure framework.
Okay, thank you, Matt. So very quickly, the Senate has passed the 2024 appropriation bill. And when it was initially submitted, the total sum was about 27.5 trillion. Now the Senate has increased it by the sum of about 1.2 trillion. And ostensibly, the official position would be that they've included projects that would supposedly benefit the people they're presumably representing. Now, key highlights of what the Senate has passed. The proposed dollar exchange rate to naira is now 800 as against 750 proposed by the executive arm, and they're looking to do 1.78 million barrels per day when the current value is about 1.2. It remains to be seen how they intend to achieve this, but fingers crossed. If they do, I'll be pleasantly surprised. And it's more importantly, it should be good for the country if the money is actually tracked and put in the proper places. Now, what this means is that it's been approved. However, the bigger test is when will the monies be released to each of the ministries, departments, and agencies to do what they need to do. We've seen that they've gotten approval to borrow money, and the monies they're going to borrow, including $7.8 billion, is presumably intended to finance the shortfall or the deficits between revenue and expenditure. So fingers crossed as to how this budget is implemented, whilst we try to get feedback or data on how the 2023 budget was executed or implemented. So for now, we keep our gunpowder dry and we watch how things unfold.
So, sorry, quickly chip in two things. You mentioned that the government is going to lend some money to be able to fill the shortfall between expenditure and revenues. And the Senate has added another 1.2 trillion. So how does that figure in? At some point, obviously, does it imply that we're going to have to take some additional money? And the second thing that I wanted to was the analogy that Omar gave about, going to go and shop and asking madam to hold additional money. You ask madam to hold additional money when you have money to give madam. In this instance, we are not having money to give madam. So why are you asking somebody to hold additional money in terms of in the guise of consistency projects?
All right, let's take a few more messages. This one is from Cisco Delgado. He says, Chibuzor, I keep saying that electricity is the nucleus of any economic development for countries. I foresee a time where Nigerians will definitely generate their own electricity within their own homes. In fact, it's already happening. People are now using solar power as alternatives to hiking electricity tariffs from the discos. Shagun says, wish state budgets were really scrutinized before they're passing, the same way the federal budget has been. Happy New Year, folks. All right, well, thank you so much for your beautiful message for the new year. Thank you for listening, and special thanks to our analysts as well for coming through, Mr. C and Chibuzor, whose middle name starts with an N. But thank you so much for coming through. We wish you a happy new year. Do stay with us. There's a lot more to come.
Yeah,